childhood to through high school, maybe college if you ended up going to college?
Well, I was raised in a military family of 7 kids. So my dad was in the Air Force, and I never lived anywhere more than 3 years. So I moved a lot, packed a lot. And as it relates to my real estate career, when you do that, you learn the mechanics of moving. And in the process, well, we often had military moves, so realtors were not involved. As I got older, realtors were involved, and I saw good ones and I knew bad ones. And even as a young adult, being a teenager, I saw the frustrations of my parents at times, and then I saw also the smooth road that could be made by a very good realtor. So I went to 5 elementary schools, 2 junior highs, and 3 high schools, and so finally landed my longest stint anywhere upon leaving the Air Force was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where I had a radio television career. And then moved to Columbus, continuing that radio and television career. But I had more moves by the time I was 30 than most people do in a lifetime.
Do you I went to 3 different schools, so not as crazy as you, but
Mhm.
I had another agent on his podcast just got posted, Ryan Bowman. He's actually
Mhm.
from the Akron, Canton, Kent area, and he moved 7 times. And in that conversation with him, I was like, as even though it sucked back then as kids to always have to start
Mhm.
over, I'm sure it has helped you as it probably did him and probably me get used to new situations, meeting new people, meeting new
Absolutely.
kids,
Right.
you know.
I always say that when I was 25 years old, people would ask me where I was from. And I don't even know how to answer that question. I mean, do you mean where I was born, where I lived last, where I lived the longest? But I'll tell you what it does for you, John. You are always the new kid. I mean, you're
Yeah,
always the new one. So you are the one that has to start the conversations, get into the group, be the joiner to get involved. And so it either will really kill you or it'll make you the mayor of any city you go to. And so in that sense, it made me, and I credit my mother in this. My mother's the one that hauled 7 kids around all this. There was never a move that was a hardship. It was always an adventure. And so,
sure.
so it does mold your personality in that respect. And then also, it's a great conversation starter. I've probably never sat on the plane or next to anyone where they talk about someplace they've been or lived that I haven't either lived in, been through, flown over, or visited. And so it does add to a well-rounded career. And tell you a story about this. Early on in my career, I had a couple from Turkey, and he was a professor at Ohio State. This was in the days where we still put them in your car and drove them around. And I said to them, I lived in Turkey when I was in the 2nd and 3rd grade. My dad was in Ankara, and it just made their day. I said, in fact, I know the Turkish national anthem, which I said, Ankara, Ankara, Güzel Ankara. And I'm telling you, they're clients for life. I mean, just the fact that at the age of 50 something, I could sing the Turkish national anthem because I went to 2nd grade in Ankara. So again, it's amazing what you can pull out of your hat when you've had a childhood like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, like for me, I grew up just south of Youngstown in a small town, and then my high school years, I moved up east of Cleveland on Lake Erie, and anytime I see a 330 area code, I'm like, oh, where are
Right.
you from? And it's always like, oh, Northeast Ohio. I'm like, yeah, but what part? Because
Yes.
there's
What
everyone.
street?
So, yeah, yeah, like what part? I'm curious, Kathy. What was the favorite? I guess the most interesting place that you did live in.
Well, it was actually, boy, it was where I ended up. Well, two things. I went my two of my 4 years in high school were in Southern California, and I still have very close friends there through Facebook and social media that I stay in touch with. And then my final move before coming to Ohio was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I'm still a water beach person. In fact, when I moved to Ohio, I was all excited when someone told me that, Wyandotte Lake was around the corner because I thought it was a lake. And so anyway, I am a water person, and so Virginia Beach is still, it still has a fondness in my heart just because of access to the ocean,
Yeah.
and again, have great friends still there.
Yeah, I grew up going to Virginia Beach. My stepdad's from Richmond. His mom was in just south of Richmond, and then for a hot second there, for at least 4 or 5 years, my parents lived in Windsor, Virginia. I think
Okay,
it's off of
know
what
exactly where it
460 or
is.
something. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
very familiar with Virginia Beach in that area. So Kathy, after high school, you mentioned that you ended up doing radio television. What was that?
Mhm.
Did you go to college for that, or did you just kind of right after
I
school
did.
dive
I
into
did
that?
and didn't. I did. I have never graduated from college. I went to 2 years at East Texas State University, which is now part of Texas A&M. Again, that's anyone who has a military background knows that you don't have a state of residence. It's whatever your mom and dad declare is their state of residence. So even though I had never lived there except being born there, that's where I had to go to college to get in-state fees. And so I went to East Texas State University. I had a real desire to do journalism and radio and television. I did 2 years there. And then in the summer between my sophomore and junior year, my father had been transferred to Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's kind of like the old movie, while you're gone, your parents move. But my parents had moved to Albuquerque. And so I went to Albuquerque, knew nobody there. But in that summer between my sophomore and junior year, I just literally rode my bicycle between 3 radio stations and had 3 radio shifts a day. And I learned more doing 3 radio shifts at no-name radio stations than I did in 2 years of college. So much to my doctorate mother's chagrin, I told her I didn't want to go back to school. I wanted to go into journalism and radio. And then from there, I began using my old cassette tapes back then. So I'm so old, John, compared to you, but cassette tapes. And I sent them out. And because I, loved Virginia and that was a home, I sent them out to radio stations there. And I was hired by the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN in Virginia Beach, on their radio end initially, and actually got paid for the first time to do radio. Did that, and then moved to the television end and was a news reporter, producer, various things for the next 20 years in 12 of those in Virginia Beach area. And then when I got married and moved to Ohio, I continued the television here in Ohio for a while. So I never went back to college, but my mother was thrilled I didn't end up on the breadline. I mean, in her mind, a radio television degree was a step above a PE degree. So she was just, afraid I would never make a living at it. But we did
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. What piqued your interest in journalism, television, radio?
Good question. I one have always been combined with moving a gazillion times and having been forced to make conversations. I have an innate curiosity. Sounds like you do too, with your very good questions. Innate curiosity about the people and why they do what they do. I am a true crime aficionado. I've watched every Dateline and 48 Hours, and people think that's a morbid thing to be interested in. But I said, no, it's a fascinating study of human behavior and what
Yeah.
people do and how they think. And I love forensics and how people think. So a lot of that comes from just being curious. And radio and television give you an opportunity and a platform to ask questions. And when I was, even up until 3 years ago, I did an afternoon radio show on 610. And, the pace about killed me because I was doing real estate and doing this show on Sundays. But I said, where else do you get a phone call returned? If I see a great book on Amazon, I can call the author. Now, if I'm just calling saying, hey, I'm a fan, will you call back? I'll never get a phone call back. But if I say, hey, I do a radio show, 610 in Columbus, Ohio, I'd love to interview you about your book. Bam, you're talking to a smart person about something you don't know about. So I I still love that. I still love the opportunity to learn about people and things. One of the things I love about my husband is that we will go off on rabbit trail conversations about absolutely anything because both of us found that one thing so fascinating. And so that all ties into journalism because to be a journalist, and I do love writing, my blog on my website is one of my favorite things to do. And so again, it gives me a platform to meet people and answer questions and learn because you can kind of, handpick the people who are smarter than you are.
Yeah. So my next question has to be, have you thought about doing podcasting?
I do and did. When I get asked that all the time, and in fact, I do radio advertising right now, and the radio
Yeah.
station that I advertise on came to me about 6 months ago, and they said, "Kathy, we are starting. We've built a podcast studio in our radio station, and we're trying to launch it as another income stream. And look, we'll give you a great deal in producing podcasts if you'll just, come to a podcast." And John, I say this with great respect to you because you are one of the reasons I didn't do it. Is I came that close to signing that contract, and then I thought to them, what do I have to say that anyone else isn't already? Like,
Yeah.
it's like saying, why don't you write a book? Well, if someone has already done it better, or someone's already written what I'm thinking so much more articulately than I can, why try to duplicate the effort? So actually my retirement dream is to do a podcast, but it likely will have nothing to do with real estate. In other words, I'll
Yeah.
find my sandbox somewhere else and go where I think it's a road less trod, where you can do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always sort of in the back of my head is I just love the medium. I love the medium of radio/podcast. And I just nothing gets me more excited than a really good podcast done very well. And so I do have I'm a big fan of them, just not ready yet to jump into that pool.
Yeah, no, I love podcasts and listen to them every single day. And one of the things I watched recently was a docu series on Rupert Murdoch.
Yep.
And a lot of times people say, as a real estate agent, we're marketers that happen to sell real estate. But after watching, his life and his story and what he built, really, as a real estate agent in today's world, we almost need to become that media company that
Mhm.
happens to focus on real estate
Right.
news, and everything else that comes to it. So, that's kind of been a little mind shift for me at the end of 2022 and 2023, which is why this podcast, I got tired of hearing, top sales agent this, top that, top this, top whatever. And I wanted to share the journey, right? Because
Hmm.
the majority of us, we don't start in real estate right out of high school or college. I
Yeah.
did, but the majority, it's second career, fourth career, fifth career, whatever. And our failure rate's so high. So I wanted to show people that it didn't matter where you came from, it didn't matter what you focused on. If you just stay consistent and showed up, and you heard other people's stories, that the success would come, right?
And you
So
know what, John? The audience loves a story. I always and again, one of the things that I do, and it's so right on with what you've said in terms of marketing. Nobody cares that I think I'm the greatest, or I'm honest, or I have integrity. They care about that when they're working with me, but what draws them to me is the story. So when I try to interview my clients after I've done a thing with them, and I don't ask them to tell everyone how great I am. I ask for their story. What brought you to this closing table? Well, I went through a divorce, or my kids off to college. I really realized that, we were living in a house that was too big, and boy, it was so hard to get rid of that stuff. And so because the audience, I'm like an afterthought. The audience is drawn in because they relate to that story. But by me being the one that casts the net to draw them in, then they become my clients. So people are far more interested in stories than they are
yeah,
necessarily a resume of accomplishments.
yeah.